All right, let's shift our focus now to battleground Quebec and what we might see as the campaign draws closer. Manon Cornellier is an editorial writer with Devoir on Parliament Hill. And in Montreal, Daniel Béland is a political science professor and director of the McGill Institute for the Study of Canada. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here. Manon, let me start with you if I can. We see the Liberals maintaining their polling lead in the province of Quebec. Why is Quebec so important to Justin Trudeau and the Liberals?
Because he has to keep his ground there, because he will lose ground unavoidably. In the Maritimes, in the Atlantic, he have all the seats, that's obvious. In the West, he has trouble with the pipeline and everything. He had to keep his ground in Quebec. And he is not in bad position right now, because the Conservatives have a concentrated support in the Chaudière-Appalaches, in the Quebec City region. And outside of there, they're really weak. You look at the result of 2015, they were 4th in 55 riding. So that's a lot. And so, and the NDP is almost collapsing. So it's the progressive in Quebec will have to look for somewhere else. So it's the Bloc Québécois, the Greens, and the Liberals that could grab this in part of their vote.
Daniel Béland, set the stage for us in Quebec as you see it now, and where you think, if we're going to see any surprises, what might we see?
Well, I think that we'll have to look at the performance of the Bloc, because with their new leader, Mr. Blanchet, the Bloc is doing a bit better in the polls, what I've seen recently. So certainly they hope to maintain their numbers and maybe even make some gains. So the Bloc could create some surprises, perhaps. With the NDP, I think it's very, very hard for them. And I think if they could preserve just a handful of their seats, the seats they have left, the seats they didn't lose back in 2015, that would already be good for them. They won't be able to keep them all, or perhaps even the majority of them, and the Liberals have an eye on them. So the surprise might be if the NDP can find a way to keep a significant number of seats in Quebec. That would be a surprise as well.
Danielle, let me stay with you. How has the SNC-Lavalin affair affected Liberal fortunes in the province? Is it sticking there, and how is it viewed in the province of Quebec?
Well, people are talking about it here. Maybe it's not as dramatic in terms of the headlines and what you see in other parts of the country. I think that people in Quebec are concerned about jobs and about keeping the headquarters in Montreal, and in general about the economic side of this story. But they're also concerned, I think, and you see that in polling numbers, about the way this affair was handled by the Prime Minister and his team. So it's not black or white. I think it's more gray in Quebec, the way people see this story. And certainly it's not nearly as negative as what you see in Alberta, for example. Because the idea that the Prime Minister will try to save jobs in Canada, and more specifically in Quebec, or defend or protect a company based in Montreal, is something that many Quebecers find to be positive. But of course, they have concerns about the way, at least the way it's portrayed in the testimony of Jody Wilson-Raybould, the way the Prime Minister and his team might have handled this affair. And so maybe people will say, well, I like the idea of protecting SNC-Lavalin, but the way the Liberals try to basically pressure Jody Wilson-Raybould was wrong, or they didn't do it the proper way. So I think that this is important to understand, that in Quebec, people have mixed feelings about this. It's not that they write a blind check to the Prime Minister. I think the Prime Minister and the Liberals have lost some points in Quebec out of that affair. And so it hasn't been positive for them in Quebec, that's for sure.
Manon, let me ask you, this has dragged on for 6 weeks now, and it looks like it might keep dragging on for some time to come. Yeah. I mean, how damaging could it be at some point to Justin Trudeau and the Liberal brand in Quebec?
I don't think it can have the biggest impact. It's nothing compared to what it is in the rest of the country, especially in Western Canada. One thing that makes a big difference is that in Quebec, people took a lot of time in the newspapers and in the news to explain what exactly is this agreement that they were looking for SNC-Lavalin. Right. That it was not like to whitewash corruption accusations. So that helped make the thing more acceptable for a number of people. In fact, I think it's maybe more the environment that will have an impact, but can be favorable to Mr. Trudeau, because Quebecers are really concerned about this issue. It was relevant in the provincial campaign, and we saw in last few polls.
Right, and that presents a special, like Andrew Scheer is trying to rebuild the Conservative Party in Quebec, but if our polling has shown that if healthcare and climate change are two of the big issues, does that present a challenge for Scheer?
Yes. Obviously, because Mr. Scheer still doesn't have an answer to the carbon tax, which in Quebec is not an issue because Quebec have its own plan that was not disputed. Even during the provincial election, Mr. Legault, who won the election from the Coalition Extra Quebec, have never debated the issue. He said, no, this is there to stay.
Quebec's got it, we're keeping it.
Quebecers are agreeing with a plan to combat climate change, so they will have no issue with Mr. Trudeau on that.
What's Daniel Béland, what's Mr. Scheer's big challenge in trying to build that party in Quebec, or is he just trying to hold on to what he has there in the next election?
Well, yeah, I think it's a big challenge. Manon Cornellier mentioned it. The support for the Conservatives is quite concentrated from a geographical standpoint. And Quebec is the only province or region of the country, according to the poll that we are talking about today, the only region of the country where climate change is one of the top 3 issues for voters. So I think this is a very strong challenge for Andrew Scheer, especially outside the few regions, Quebec City, Chaudière-Appalaches, that Manon Cornellier mentioned earlier. Andrew Scheer is not that well known in Quebec, and it was tough for Stephen Harper. So it's also tough for Andrew Scheer, who comes also from Western Canada and is lesser known in Quebec than Stephen Harper was. So I think that there is an issue here in terms of him as a leader, but also an issue regarding the stances, really the positions of the party on the environment and on other issues like healthcare, which might conflict or be at odds with what quite a few voters in Quebec believe in.
I want to come back to what Danielle talked earlier about the Bloc Québécois and its new leader. We're seeing, and it's kind of a mishmash question here, but let me throw it out. We're seeing the struggling NDP. We're seeing the Green Party moving up in support in the province of Quebec. So if there's good, what are the choices that progressives are going to have in Quebec if they're thinking twice about Justin Trudeau for any reason? And right now he's holding on to a lot of support in Quebec. But what should we watch for in terms of, where supporters might go if they leave the Liberals? Who are the options?
Yeah, I think it will be fragmented because you have those people, environmentalists, who are really angry about the fact that they bought a pipeline in the West. Those, if they maybe will migrated to the Green Party. We saw at the Outremont by-election, the Green Party arriving quite well. I have my numbers just here. It arrived third. Yeah. In front of the Bloc Québécois, which never did really well.
And in our polling in Quebec, the Green Party's polling at 12, in Abacus polling, 12%, and the NDP's at 9%. The Green Party's ahead.
So if people, the progressives, don't want to go with the, and who are disappointed with the NDP and don't want to go with the Liberals, they will go maybe to the Green. You have also a number of regions, and those are concerning for the Conservative, people who will go back to the Bloc Québécois, and also some progressive people who are more kind of
because a lot of the Bloc supporters in the last couple of elections have voted New Democrats, right? And many of them would have gone New Democrat, and some of
or even Liberal at the last election, because the objective was to kick Mr. Harper out. Right. So it depends of what is the issue, and I think that if the environment is like the kind of the topic, it will be interesting to see how the Liberals are able to keep all this a big chunk of that vote with them.
How do you see that, Mr. Béland?
No, I agree that the Green Party is rising in the polls in Quebec, and that's very interesting. It might have an impact on some races when you have 3 or 4 different candidates who parties who are have a shot at it. I'm not sure if they will win any seats in Quebec, and if they win some seats, might be very few. But I think that but you never know in Quebec. We have waves sometimes, and we saw what happened in 2011. But I think that certainly the rise of the Green Party is very bad news for the NDP. And I think that's an issue that NDPers in Quebec will have to think about. How do we get people who maybe voted for the NDP in the past who are tempted by the Green option? how can we make sure that they stay with the NDP? So that's a key issue. A party we haven't talked about yet because it's not doing well in Quebec in the polls or elsewhere in the country is Maxime Bernier's party.
We're going to finish on that, so you started it. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, well, Maxime Bernier is from Quebec, but this party is not doing so well in the polls. Could it make a difference in some ridings if, again, you have a race with 3 or 4 parties that have a shot at it, and although they don't win any seats in Quebec, they might be able in some ridings to make a difference. But so far, I don't see that. But they still have 6 months to maybe make a bigger impact, and it will depend also what local candidates they will pick, people who will run for the party. We saw in Barnaby South that the People's Party candidate did very well, got more than 10% of the support because it was someone who had followers from the evangelical community, Chinese evangelicals and so forth. And you can imagine in Quebec, of course, different demographics, but people who might, if Maxime Bernier can find some star candidates, quote unquote, within that movement or within that right-wing, media, people that you see, for example, in Quebec City, you have these radio hosts who are really well known, or in some regions where the Conservatives are typically strong, it might make a difference. But so far, I don't see really that they are too low in the polls to really matter at this point, but there's still 6 months before the election.
Okay, quickly, final comment to you, Manon, on that, on Maxime Bernier.
I think it will hold his riding. You have more than 60% of the vote the last time, but he will lose ground because of his harsh opposition to supply management. He's in an agricultural region. So in Quebec, this point of view will be a kind of a handicap for him. Also, he doesn't want to do anything about climate change. So there's a number of issues that can play against him, and it's for the Conservative that it's maybe annoying maybe in ridings where their score are not as high as they are in some others, because they had big score in some ridings last time. But I think if you have a seat me, I will say Mr. Bernier maybe will be there.
And it hurts the Conservatives simply because, in an election campaign, they're going to have the Conservatives are going to be telling Quebecers why they should vote Conservatives, and a guy who used to be with the team is going to be telling them why they shouldn't.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you both for your time today. Appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you for the invitation.